So Republican presidential hopefuls were in Iowa over the weekend for an annual Roast and Ride fundraising event hosted by Senator Joni Ernst. Every declared GOP presidential candidate except for frontrunner Donald Trump attended the event, delivering shortened versions of their stump speeches in front of voters at the Iowa State Fairgrounds. Also in Iowa, CNN held a town hall last night for former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. The 2024 presidential candidate spoke for an hour and a half to voters as she tries to build momentum for a campaign which is only receiving single-digit support in most national polls. Here are some of the highlights.
It is in the best interest of America. It's in the best interest of our national security for Ukraine to win. We have to see this through. We have to finish it. I am unapologetically pro-life. Having said that, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice any more than I want them to judge me for being pro-life.
The 6-week ban theoretically came to your desk. Would you sign it?
But why? I will answer that when you ask Kamala and Biden if they would agree to 37 weeks, 38 weeks, 39 weeks. Then I'll answer your question. When it comes to our schools, secure our schools. There should be one point of entry. There should be a law enforcement officer at every school. We should make sure there's the clear bulletproof tape that we have at courthouses and airports. We should have that on our schools to protect them. And we should have a mental health counselor at every single school, not a guidance counselor, but a mental health counselor.
Some states have been experimenting with red flag laws, which enables law enforcement and the courts to temporarily either remove guns or block people from being able to purchase guns, individuals who have been adjudicated in some way from posing a threat to themselves or others. Is that something that you might support?
No, I don't trust government to deal with red flag laws. I don't trust that they won't take them away from people who rightfully deserve to have them.
I'm wondering how willing you are to talk to the people, Republican voters, to say, that wasn't true. That didn't happen.
I've been on the record to say that while I think that we had issues, I don't think that any of them changed the election. I have also said, when he said it was a beautiful day, January 6th, I think January 6th was a terrible day.
So, Jonathan Mir, you go down the list there, and there's certainly a hell of a lot more mainstream, more of a Main Street Republican than what we've seen over the past 6-7 years. She understands the importance of freedom prevailing in Ukraine instead of Russian invasion. She even said on the issue of abortion, she said, I respect people who are pro-choice. I hope they'll respect me for being pro-life. That is a good starting point to actually have conversations. Schools, if they want to toughen up the schools, if they want to secure the schools, I'm all fine for that. If the federal government, if she really thinks the federal government has the money to do all that to all the schools, I have no problem with security around schools at all. In fact, that's a good thing. But you get to just one thing she said that's troubling to me, red flag laws, something that 80% of Americans support, at least 80% of Americans support. And the idea is, of course, to take weapons of war away from people who are mentally disturbed, who threaten their spouses, who threaten their friends, who threaten their coworkers, and this whole thing about I don't trust government. There's slaughters in banks, there's slaughters in churches, there's slaughters in Christian schools, there's slaughters in synagogues, there's slaughters in Uvalde, there's slaughters in Parkland, there's slaughters in Sandy Hook, there's slaughters all over these places, and time again, we hear stories about a brooding person, an angry person that people were concerned about. And so again, I want to keep this in perspective. She said a lot of things there that I think mainstream Republicans also would be very comfortable with, that I think are positive signs. But that red flag law, it's an example. It's just, again, a window into the soul of the Republican base, that even the most basic gun safety laws that would keep weapons of war out of the hands of mentally insane, mentally unstable people, they don't even do that.
Red flag laws enjoy widespread support, and opposing red flag laws and deciding instead to harden schools opposed to doing anything with guns themselves, the ability to access guns. I mean, that's right out of the NRA playbook. That is right out of the Republican Party's cultural attachment to guns. And it seems like very few of them are willing to defy that orthodoxy. And you're right. She had some more mainstream appealing views there, perhaps. I mean, we know her poll numbers are very low right now. Maybe that can change. But one note here, Joe, is as much as, yes, she said like a very human thing about how she doesn't want to judge someone who's pro-choice, just as she would not want to judge anyone because she is pro-life. She would not want to be judged herself. She didn't answer the question about the national abortion ban. And that is, and I was talking to some White House officials at the end of last week over the weekend, they say they can't wait. They literally can't wait until the first Republican debate, when undoubtedly there will be a question asked. Show your hand. Raise your hands if you support a national abortion ban in X number of weeks, and all these candidates are going to have to go on record for it. And they just think that moment more than any, right there at the beginning of this race, is going to crystallize the differences between where President Biden is and where any Republican is over the issue that very well may decide the next election.
So, Rev, though, she had an interesting retort to Jake Tapper, which is ask Joe Biden, ask Kamala Harris. Do you put it at 38 weeks? Do you put it at 39 weeks? Because the truth is, if you want to know where Americans are in the polling, you know, abortion issues are all over the place. But the plurality of Americans support 15 weeks, 16 weeks, right? Get through the first trimester and a couple of weeks after that. That's where most Americans are on this issue. And you don't hear Democrats don't want to be nailed down to, yes, I support a 15-week ban. I support a 20-week ban. I support a 24-week ban. They won't do that either. So Democratic candidates need to be ready, too, because again, Americans don't support 35 weeks. They don't support 38 weeks. They want exceptions. They certainly want exceptions for life of the mother. But there is a place in there where there is a consensus. I know 15 weeks is not where any Democratic candidate will ever go, but that is where most Americans are.
I think she telegraphed what can be a very delicate and touchy point for Democratic candidates that they ought to be prepared for when she, not by the way, answering Tapper's question, went to, I'll answer that when you ask Joe Biden and Kamala Harris about 38 weeks. That means that they should be prepared for that. That's going to come up. And you're right. I think that most Americans are certainly pro-choice, but there is not an unlimited amount of choice in terms of the timetable that they would go for. And I think that they need to really be prepared to hear that, because I think Nikki Haley was waiting on that to throw that out there, not only as a defense, because she didn't want to get pinned down, but really forecasting that's where they're going to try to go with this whole right to choose debate.